Sonic Racing Crossworlds is an amazing game. For this game to continue being successful, I think it needs to have tons of DLC, tons of updates, and it just needs to get to the same level of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in terms of content. We just need to have constant DLC flow with characters, racetracks, and so much more, right? Ultimately, getting more original tracks would be a lot more ideal, but I think it's more realistic to look at the past Sonic entries and draw some inspiration from there. What if Sega asked fans which zones they would like to see return as Crossworlds, or even as completely new racetracks for Sonic Racing Crossworlds? What would my choices be? That's what we're going to decide in this video. Let's go through the entire Sonic series, pick a zone or two from each game, and see what we'd like to see added as different tracks or Crossworlds in the game. And just a reminder, you guys, this video is brought to you by Gamer Latam, so a huge thanks to them for sponsoring this video. We have a giveaway going on, so you can check all of that information out on screen as well as in the description below. And definitely see what else we've got going on. We do lots of really cool Sonic content. We also have some fighting game content coming out soon as well, so be on the lookout. So starting off with Sonic 1, we've got Green Hill Zone, of course. Psych! I'm not doing Green Hill Zone, bro. Are you kidding me? No way. No way. For Sonic 1, I'm going to put Starlight Zone in there. You know, we don't really have many night stages in the game, and I think a City at Night is something we don't already have yet. So I think it'd be a pretty unique theme, all things considered. Aside from like the Sonic Drift series, we've also never seen Starlight Zone reimagined in any previous Sonic game, and this is a zone people wanted to see in Sonic Mania really badly, me included, so I think it would make a lot of people happy to see it reimagined for a racing game. I think the seesaws would be a fun mechanic where you can use them as ramps, and if you drive over it, nobody can use it as a ramp unless it goes back up again after a short time period. I think that's probably like the most interesting thing you could really do with a stage like that, but I think for the most part, it should just be like a pretty safe standard track. Okay, now we have Sonic 2 to look at. I'm picking this next course for a lot of the same reasons that I chose Starlight Zone from Sonic 1. Mystic Cave Zone is like an all-timer for Sonic 2. We have yet to see it properly remastered or reimagined to fit a racing game. It only shows up in Sonic Drift 2, and let's be real, nobody cares about Sonic Drift, bro. I don't care about Sonic. I never hear anyone talk about Sonic Drift, like, ever. And again, a lot like with Starlight Zone, people really wanted this zone in Sonic Mania, and even in Sonic Generations way back in the day when people were discussing which zones we might see return. Mystic Cave Zone could be a really visually stunning course in HD. I think one of my main gripes with some of the tracks that we already have in Sonic Racing Crossworlds is that they have these really long grass cuts on one side toward the end of the track. It's usually like on the left somewhere, and it's for you to be able to use wisps to sort of blast across rough terrain to get ahead of the competition and snag a better placement, but I think it's cool for a few tracks, but oh my god, they do this way too much. It is in way too many of the tracks, if you ask me. So I think for Mystic Cave Zone, it would be really cool if we switch it up and did the exact opposite. I think it'd be super funny if in the third lap, toward the end of the finish line, they added like a giant pit in the middle that you could fall through if you're not careful. You could have it split the racers and force them to pick a side to spice things up. It would be a really clever reference, you know, to the infamous Supersonic pit at the end of Act 2. And it would add some mind games where you have to make a split decision, you know, last second on which side you're going to take in order to complete the race. So I think there's some really fun stuff you could potentially do to kind of mess around and troll some Sonic fans, and I'm all about that, man. So Mystic Cave Zone, you're getting in there. If I did have to pick like a second zone for Sonic 2, it'd probably be a combination of Sky Chase and Wing Fortress. So the reason I'm picking Sky Chase Zone is I think it could really be just a really unique aerial track. You could probably bring the Turtleoids back. You know, I really like those guys. They're super funny. I think they're cool. You could have some interesting plane sections, you know. It'd be probably better as just a cross world, but I would not complain if it was a full track. Like, imagine if during lap 3, right, you're ascending to space and then you arrive at the Death Egg or something. Like, that would be so sick. Like, imagine the view. The skybox is changing right before your eyes from just like a regular sunny blue sky, and then suddenly you're up in outer space. They already have the Death Egg robot in the game, so, you know, they might as well. We know Sega, they love to reuse assets. This is a good chance to do that. Alright, we have arrived at Sonic CD. I feel like the obvious choice for a track is something like Metallic Madness or Stardust Speedway, and that makes sense. You know, the boss fight here against Metal Sonic is literally a race to the finish, but I think we've seen Stardust Speedway remakes enough times throughout the series to get something different. We need to spice it up. We need to change things for sure. My choice for a track based on Sonic CD isn't from a zone. And no, it's not the intro either, even though that'd be super sick. You know, we already have Toot Toot Sonic Warrior in the game with, you know, the Sonic Heroes track, but I think for Sonic CD, we've got to go with the special stages. I think the special stages would be a really cool way to shake things up. I think using the special stages from CD would be so out of left field. Like, I'd really want Sega to just go crazy on the visual effects. Like, you know, kind of like how Sonic Team did with a lot of the Radical Highway sections in Shadow Generations. I just want it to look super trippy. Like, I just want people to look at this and think this place is weird, you know? I think it'd be really cool too if they took all the different backgrounds from Sonic CD and they just remade them in 3D, you know? Some of the original backgrounds would look pretty sick, you know, like the rainbow one is really unique. The one with the green sky and the pink water that I have right here that you can see. Or even the secret Robotnik themed one with a giant Robotnik head. I think that could make for some fun stuff. There's a couple ways they could implement them all, you know, into a single racetrack. Maybe it's like a North Star Island thing where they're all mashed up together so you could get a little bit of everything. Or each time the track loads, you get a randomly selected skybox or color palette, kind of like how the Pac-Man one is randomly generated in the maze section. I just feel like this would stand out in a good way. You know, it'd probably be a lot more suited to a Crossworld similar to how Lost World from Sonic Colors was implemented, but I'd be happy to see Sonic CD referenced all the same. I think this would be a really cool way to do it. All right, now we're at Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and oh man, Sonic 3 and Knuckles is a really hard game to pick stages for, which might be surprising, but let me explain. On one hand, you have several stages that have already been remastered in previous Sonic titles like Generations, Mania, and on another hand, you have zones like Sky Sanctuary and Sandopolis Zone that were already reimagined as racetracks in Sonic and Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed and Team Sonic Racing respectively. I really wanted to pick Ice Cap, I really did, but if we're not getting a remix of the OG music from Brad Buxer and, you know, the Michael Jackson team, I don't even want it, man. I really want to pick something that's both unique and would make people happy, and really everything has been done before in the series in one way or another. Like, what do you even pick that hasn't been done before? A part of me wanted to pick Carnival Night Zone since it's only been brought back once and it was for Lego Dimensions of all things. But I can't bring myself to do it. We already have Roulette Road in the game. It would be too similar if you ask me. I don't know, like, the whole Michael Jackson thing really makes it hard for you to narrow it down because, like, the music in these stages is what people like so much. It's what's so beloved about the early Genesis titles especially. I mean, you can't take the music away, you know, like, it just loses its identity. It's not the same. This was a tough choice, but I think I'm going to have to go with Hydro City Zone. We've never seen the zone in a 3D Sonic game officially, and to me, it makes the most sense. Sonic fans love this zone, from its music, aesthetic choices, and level design. I mean, what isn't there to love? This zone is super iconic, especially since it returned in Sonic Mania, and I think it's something that would make a lot of people happy. I think a lot of the Sonic community, even people who prefer like the newer, you know, the newer, more modern titles, they mess with Hydro City Zone. Like, they love that zone. So I think it would make so many people smile if this was just dropped one day for sure. Okay. Probably thought we were going to talk about Sonic Adventure, but no. We're going to be talking about Sonic R. Yep, we're going to be putting Sonic R in the list. So aside from the Sega All-Stars Racing games and Riders series, Sonic R is the game most people think of, especially when it comes to the classic Sonic era of spin-offs. So I really want to make sure it gets a track. Plus, I think Sega owes us for making us think that Team Sonic Racing was going to be a Sonic R sequel. Like, bro, don't put the R in there if you're not going to do it. Like, you have to full send it if you're putting that R there. I think that was super messed up. Our Sonic R track is going to be the final unlockable course. We're going to go with a Radiant Emerald. How could you not? How could you not? I chose this one because I thought it would stand out due to the unique theme. There's nothing like it in the game already. You know, you're practically on a track made of floating, translucent, hue shifting gemstones in space. And that's pretty cool if you ask me. I feel like Crossworlds could use sort of a more difficult Rainbow Road inspired track, and I think Radiant Emerald is perfect. People kind of refer to it as like the Rainbow Road of Sonic R, and I would hope that this would apply to, you know, Sonic Racing Crossworlds as well. We've had the theme of Sonic R Supersonic Racing remixed throughout the Sonic series and its spin-offs on multiple occasions, so I'd love for the Crossworlds team to remix Diamond in the Sky or even incorporate, you know, some of the other Sonic R songs into this new piece. I think that would be super fun for people to listen to. My honorable mention and secondary choice for Sonic R, that's right, we're giving it 2. It has to go to Radical City, man. I think seeing anything from Sonic R get remade and actually be good, you know, it would be something special for sure. Radical City would be such a total treat to see as like an actual living, bustling city. I really think that Sega has an opportunity to kind of like correct their wrongs. And I think lately in the series, they've been doing a fantastic job with that. You know, you take a look at something like Frontiers, and you take a look at something like, you know, Shadow Generations, and even more recently with Sonic Racing Crossworlds. I feel like they've kind of taken a lot of things that people don't like about the series, whether it be characters or certain dialogue or, you know, just anything really. And they've really just been amping it up and making it larger than life in a lot of ways. So I think they really have a good chance to do something like that for some of the Sonic art tracks, you know, make them actually cool, make people actually want to go back and see what was so magical about, you know, the Sega Saturn low poly era. Also, I think Tails Doll and Mecha Knuckles need to be DLC playable characters. They literally come from racing games. I need them as DLC. I need to see Tails Doll on an Extreme Gear like today. Alright, so Sonic Adventure, it already has a track in the game being Sand Road, which I think was a really neat inclusion when it was first introduced in Team Sonic Racing, but in Crossworlds, it doesn't really resemble its Sonic Adventure counterpart at all. It feels more like a blend between the Sandopolis track from TSR and the Pyramid stages from Sonic Adventure 2 of all things. Nothing really gives it that Sonic Adventure edge. It feels too futuristic at parts, like with how the tops of the pyramids are like literally floating and glowing. It doesn't do that in SA1, and I just don't feel like it's a proper representation of the original Sonic Adventure. If it was up to me and I had to pick something, I think I'd probably pick the Egg Carrier. It just makes the most sense to me, you know, like it's big enough for you to be able to have drivers drive along, you know, the actual surface, the actual like deck of the ship. And there's a lot of different parts you could really go through. You know, you could go through the outside, you could go through the interior. There's a lot of really cool rooms on the actual Egg Carrier if you explore it on Sonic Adventure. And I think that would translate really well to like a really unique layout for a racetrack. We've never seen it return in the series in any big sort of way, and I feel like a spin-off racing game, it just makes sense, man. It just makes way too much sense to include this. I think that Act 1 could start off all dark and cloudy with a flight section in the middle. I think that would be super fitting for Lap 1. And I'd want it to look like the second act of Sky Chase with tons of small planes everywhere. Like, I just want it to look like a straight up dogfight. Like, I just want it to look like, you know, there's bullets spraying everywhere. There's missiles being aimed towards you and all the other racers. The Egg Carrier itself is like shooting that giant laser that we all know and love. It would just be so cool. And for other hazards, you know, we've got to have some other awesome stuff. We've got to have something like, you know, maybe Chaos 6 is there and he's attacking you on top of the ship where the boss fight originally takes place. Ooh, you know what? Better yet, add that cut boss fight from Sonic Adventure 1. You know, the robot dragon. The robot dragon is so cool. I think that'd be a super cool deep cut. You know, we already have the Ender Dragon in the game, so it's not like Sega has to do much else other than just actually make the model and a couple animations, I think. And you just got to make some new particle effects. I really think that would be a smart way to do asset reuse, but have it not look cheap or like super lazy. I think that would be super smart. And for the third lap, I think for the third lap, we need to make sure that it looks totally different. You know, gone are the cloudy skies and the dark atmosphere, and instead we get a bright sunny view of the Egg Carrier floating in the middle of the ocean. We can also replace the flight section with something unique, like a brand new water section, you know, seeing that it did sink like how it did in the original Sonic Adventure. You know, maybe Chaos 6 or the dragon that we had in that flight section can be replaced with like E101 Beta, and he's shooting lasers and rockets at the players just like he does at the end of Gamma's story. So he's like shooting at you while you're in the water, and he's like, you know, toward the back of the Egg Carrier. Also, on a totally unrelated note, I think we need to see Chaos and Gamma as playable characters in Crossworlds. I don't care what the explanation is. I don't care if it's canon or not. Like, just put them in there, man. We have Sonic Prime. Those guys are doo-doo. I will take the Sonic Adventure characters any other day. The music for the Egg Carrier, though, I think it should borrow a lot of different elements from a lot of things that are based around the Egg Carrier. You know, you could include, you could include like both of the Egg Carrier themes from both when it's above water and when it's, you know, in the water, as well as like, you know, the different Skydeck tracks that we see throughout the game. And on top of that, you could even probably put like Beta's boss fight theme in there in like some aspect for lap 3. I think there's a lot of really cool things you can pull from to just make it like a great, you know, Sonic Adventure 1 medley almost. But yeah, I think I'm pretty satisfied with my choice for Sonic Adventure 1's track. I think that Carrier is super awesome, and I'd be super happy to see it come back again. Alright, Sonic Adventure 2. I want to see City Escape so bad, but I'm not basic. I'm going to be cool. I'm going to be quirky. I'm going to be different. SA2 is also pretty tough to pick a track for because, like, there's already a good handful of, you know, Sonic Adventure 2 representation, as well as just, like, Sonic Adventure 2 adjacent tracks already in the game. We have obvious ones like Middle Harbor, Radical Highway, which are super obvious, but then there's tracks we talked about earlier, kind of like Sand Road, and even other courses like Pumpkin Manor and White Space have some Sonic Adventure 2-esque assets and level themes sprinkled throughout in the background in, you know, sneaky ways. So a part of me honestly wants to say that we should just get like the Chow Race as a course where you go through different parts of the Chow Gardens and Chow Racetracks, but we already have Chow Park, so I'm kind of inclined to pick something else. Nah, you know what? Fuck it. If they're not going to give us a Chow Garden, if we can't like pet the Chow, we should at least be able to like run them over or something. Like, come on, let us do something with them. Stop putting them in the background and just we just want to pet their heads. We want to pet their bald Caillou heads. That's all we want to do. We've been waiting for decades, man. If I had to pick another level to add though, it's kind of like between Meteor Herd and Aquatic Mine, but I feel like we have a good handful of like outer space theme tracks already, so I think we'll go with Aquatic Mine for this one. Part of me just really wants to have like an official remix of Dive Into the Mellow, which is the stage theme for Aquatic Mine. We could get a new rapper to feature on it, you know, make new lyrics, do whatever you got to do. Like we could do it Sonic Mania style where it's just completely new rapper, completely new voice track. Ideally, it'd be really cool to feature like a famous mainstream rap artist, but I think realistically, we'd probably get like T Lopes or like Lotus Juice on the mic for something like that, which I think would still be like super amazing. I think that would be super cool, and I'm sure they would, you know, they would put some fantastic work into that. Dude, imagine the cursed timeline where like Knuckles raps are back, right? But the person that they pick Jelly Roll because the Sega executives are like, oh, Sonic 3 did so well. Like, let's ask him to come back. Ian Flynn would have to write Knuckles to quote Jelly Roll instead. So like in the next IDW comic, Knuckles would be all like, we do this everywhere we go, Sonic. Don't worry guys, it's not gonna happen. I don't think he's coming back. Don't worry. I think we're safe. So I think Heroes has had more than enough representation across the Sonic Racing spin-offs, and I think just the series as a whole for that matter. Everything is Seaside Hill, Casino Park, or Final Fortress, and I really think we're long overdue for some variety. I think it's time we take a look at one of the best zones from Sonic Heroes. It's Grand Metropolis, baby, Grand Metropolis. Hey, how can you not like Grand Metropolis? Especially to get it as a racetrack, like, I think that'd be pretty sweet. I think this one out of all the Heroes tracks probably makes the most sense in my brain. You know, you'd be driving on top of those floating blue walkways that you run across in Heroes. I think that'd be neat, and you know, the roads would increase your speed no matter how much you could possibly need. And I've been saying this for a lot of the other tracks I've chosen so far, and I'm probably going to keep saying it, but I need to hear like a Generations tier remix of Grand Metropolis. I think it's honestly one of the best songs in the whole soundtrack, and it would just be amazing to get like a new remix for that song. I don't really have too much else to add because like I said, Heroes has had plenty of representation. Even in the Sonic racing games, there's so many racetracks just throughout the series based on Sonic Heroes. So I don't know. Within the past 2 decades, I think we need a bit of a refresher, but I do think if we had to get something, I think Grand Metropolis would be the best contender for sure. Shadow the Hedgehog is kind of a weird case, right? Because we have Digital Circuit already in the game, but it doesn't really look like Digital Circuit from Shadow the Hedgehog, and it's sort of ambiguous whether or not it's like really the same stage. So let's just assume that it doesn't have a track and we're going to add something new. Yeah, for Shadow the Hedgehog, we're adding Westopolis. I know it's a really basic choice compared to a lot of the other niche references I've selected thus far, but I really do think that Westopolis is probably the only track most people would care about seeing. I truly believe that we were robbed of getting a zone from Shadow the Hedgehog in Shadow Generations. I think the game was fantastic, don't get me wrong, and the boost gameplay in the series has pretty much been the best that they've had to offer up until that point. Like, it is really good in Shadow Gens. But I was a little surprised not to see any stages based off of anything from Shadow's very own game. I mean, we had Black Doom, but no actual levels, which was kind of weird. Yeah, sorry that this one's kind of short, but I don't know. It's really hard for me to like anything from this game, and I just think Westopolis is something that people would recognize, so we'll just stick with that. Now that we're done talking about Shadow the Hedgehog, we're going to shift gears and talk about one of the worst games in the entire Sonic series. Nearly killed the series, and is infamous for ruining one of gaming's best franchises. You know what's coming next. That's right. It's Sonic Riders. Alright, jokes aside, I don't really like Sonic Riders. I personally don't find it to be fun, and the mechanics don't really do anything for me. I'd be down to go more in depth about how I feel in a future video if people would like to hear what I think, but all I need to know for now is that I don't like the Riders games. I prefer the kart racers. But I'd still like to give it an extra racetrack, seeing as we have Extreme Gears and the Babylon Rogues in the game. It still kind of baffles me that we only got one Riders track added to the game, and it's only as a Crossworld. White Cave is all we've got. That's kind of wild if you ask me. And even as someone who doesn't like Sonic Riders, I can't help but think, like, why, bro? Maybe we'll get a Riders themed update or festival with some old school Extreme Gear parts and character skins added to Crossworlds in a future update. I think that'd be cool, and hey, I'd be happy to have vehicle parts and stuff to customize and play around with any day, so that would be super neat. Yeah, going back on topic, I think my choice for the Riders track definitely has to be Metal City. I think it does a good job of establishing some Riders nostalgia that's really much needed in Crossworlds. I don't think that this track needs to do anything crazy per se. You know, it doesn't have to be super difficult like some of the other DLC tracks. I just think it'd be nice to have Metal City return and be reimagined with that Crossworlds flair that we all love so much. Maybe you could have some elements from Sonic Free Riders, seeing as that course was also in Free Riders, but yeah, I'm locking in Metal City for my answer on this one. Now it's Sonic.exe time. I think it's kind of interesting that the only time we get references to 06 is like in Sonic Generations or Shadow Generations, which is good though, because, you know, that gives us room to be a little bit creative here. I think there are a lot of good options available, you know, as good as they get by Sonic.06 standards anyway. But I'm thinking White Acropolis is probably the best decision hands down. We only have one ice track in the game, so getting a second one at night would be kind of cool. And I'd probably opt out of making the roads super slippery for this one. I don't think that every time you see snow or ice in a game that you have to have ice physics, so let's just have it be an aesthetic thing, you know, just for this course anyway. Plus in the original level in 06, you literally hop on a snowboard for this, so getting to upgrade to an extreme gear or an actual kart heading downhill and just jumping off of ramps would be super fun, you know. Not many in courses have you actually go downhill, so I think this would be a great opportunity to introduce a course that lets you do that. I feel like having some set pieces from Sonic.06, you know, such as the constant spotlights hovered over your race car, laser walls, or even the 06 Egg Gunners would make this track super great. The Egg Gunners are already in the game for Eggman Expo, so you might as well add them here too. But yeah, my choice for a Sonic.06 track, it's going to White Acropolis for sure. Now it's time for us to talk about a Sonic Rush game. We're going to be talking about Rush Adventure specifically. Initially, I wasn't going to include anything from this series, but my friends who are Sonic fans talked about this video with me, and the question I kept getting asked by them was what I would want to see for one of the Rush games. So that definitely got me thinking for sure, right? Because Sonic Rush definitely has its fans. There's a remake coming out. There's a lot of people, you know, who love characters like Blaze, for example. And outside of seeing Blaze in like the IDW comics and spin-offs, yeah, Sonic Rush doesn't really get much attention, does it? I mean, we get the odd piece of like Sonic channel art here and there, but outside of that, there's really not too much to look forward to if you're a Rush fan. We do have Water Palace in the game, but like with Digital Circus, but oh my god, I can't believe I said that. We do have Water Palace, but like with Digital Circuit from Shadow the Hedgehog, it doesn't really proudly represent its game of origin like a badge of honor, and instead, it's just sort of loosely based on the stage of the same name from Sonic Rush, and I think that needs to be changed. I just don't know what the heck is up with that logic, because like, I feel like these spin-off games and crossovers are the moments where it actually is important to make callbacks and references such as these, so I don't really understand why they got cold feet, you know, because Sonic fans, you know, maybe they complain about reused level themes and they didn't want to like full send it, but I don't know. That's probably just like speculation at this point. I really don't know. I feel like these spin-offs are where you actually should do that rather than the actual mainline games, if that makes any sense. Anyways, let's choose our course. My choice for the Sonic Rush series, it's going to be going to Sky Babylon. I really feel like there are some cool things you could do with this course, you know. I think the roads that explode behind you as you run past them would be a really cool thing to add, and I think it would translate well for a racetrack. Maybe they could be on like shortcut segments where if you fall too far behind or you end up getting hit, then you risk falling off the track, you know, because the road is gone. It could be like a high risk, high reward sort of thing. I think it's important that this course gives off the feeling that you're like way higher up in the sky than you should be. I'd really love it if there was some, you know, sort of don't look down moments per se. Most courses in Crossworlds don't really play with the camera angles very much to convey dramatic shifts like mid-race, such as that. So I think it would be a really unique thing to have sort of a dynamic camera. But yeah, I think Sky Babylon has potential to be a really fun way to represent the Rush series. Oh, Sonic Unleashed fans, we have been eating good in Crossworlds, haven't we? To be honest, a lot of my desired choices already got into Crossworlds. Like, those being Holoska and Dragon Road. I love Cool Edge and Shun Nan. and Apodos and Rooftop Runner in the mix too. So I think those courses are also great additions. You know, there are some great racetracks and Crossworlds that represent the Unleashed game, I guess. So I kind of feel like there's not really too much more you could add, you know? But gosh, if I really had to pick something, I think it'd just have to be Jungle Joyride. I guess we're going with that. Yeah, I'm going with Jungle Joyride. The only reason I want to do that track is because we don't really have a tropical or beach themed course in the game already. The closest thing we have is the Goo Lagoon section in Bikini Bottom, but I'd argue you're thinking about SpongeBob more than you are about beaches and palm trees when you're playing on that track. So I think Jungle Joyride is probably it. You know, I gotta pick something. I'm already really happy with what we had for the Unleashed representation, so we'll just pick a unique theme. Why not? It's time to bless you all with yet another track from the Riders series. The track I'm choosing is Dolphin Resorts, and the reason I'm choosing that track, the reason I really like it so much, I just think it's so cool. It's a giant beach town that really leans into that feeling of hosting a giant televised sporting event. Like, it accomplishes its job really well, and I don't really think any other Freeriders track really kind of matched that energy. I know some of them kind of try to do, but I remember playing Sonic Freeriders for the first time when it came out as a kid on the Kinect, and I really remember this track leaving a good impression on me. I think there's some cool things you do, you know, with the underwater tunnel. I think that's probably like my favorite part of the course. I love how that part of the track looks, and I think it'd be breathtaking to see it in Crossworlds. Obviously, this course would lean into having some boat sections, but I think if they went for like a similar layout to Holoska, where it's like open and you have alternate paths where you can choose from, you know, based on the actual playstyle, you can choose between like a boat or land or something, you know, who knows, you could get creative with it. I think that would make people happy. Just give people options. Just so long as it's not like the end of Chow Park or Bikini Bottom, like those turns are the worst. Like, I hate the boat controls so much, man. Like, it just, we need to fix those in an update. I'm begging you. All right, moving on, we've got Sonic Colors. So Sonic Colors has a few tracks in the game already with Sweet Mountain and Galactic Parade, but they're only available as Crossworlds. My initial idea was to add Aquarium Park, but we already have Dragon Road in the game, and that's kind of an Asian-inspired water track already, and I feel like Aquarium Park might be a little bit similar, so I don't want to tread the same ground here. Plus, I've added a lot of courses that could very easily have boating sections in them, so let's spice things up a little bit. Let's go ahead and add Asteroid Coaster to this list. This track is like really spooky looking, surprisingly. Like, it has this intimidating atmosphere to it that other courses in Sonic Racing Crossworlds kind of lack, and I think the closest thing we have to this track would probably be something like Magma Planet, which, by the way, is a totally underrated track, and I'm gonna get into why that is later, so pay attention. Going back to Asteroid Coaster, yeah, there's a lot of locales you could kind of play around with here, such as like the vast caverns, enclosed factory sections, or even jumping across different meteors and planets and hopping along the actual like roller coaster part. I also think it would make sense to have a course like this be a little bit more on the difficult side for some extra challenge, and having hidden routes to use as shortcuts for some of the more knowledgeable players would make a lot of sense here too. But yeah, that's probably my current choice for Sonic Colors. Sonic Generations, I'm just going to skip that game, and the reason why is because I don't think it needs another track. We already have the white space from Shadow Generations, and I think that's more than enough. Like, there's really nothing you could do for Sonic Generations, so let's move on. Just kidding. Green Hill Zone for Sonic. So Sonic Lost World is a game that people often put down because of how generic and safe this game tends to be compared to other earlier entries in the series, and I know I've done it a lot. And that's because 99% of the game is kind of just like uninteresting across many different mediums. You know, the story stinks, the new characters, the Deadly Six, they stink. Everything about this game, it's just not cool, it's cringe, it's so basic and it's just boring. But that 1% of the time where they do something intriguing is so memorable and so cool, and I think they're really underappreciated moments in the Sonic series altogether. So for Sonic Lost World, we're actually going to be picking two courses because I really couldn't decide on which one I wanted to see more. So our first choice for Sonic Lost World is going to be Honeycomb Highway. First of all, the music totally bangs. And second, turning this level into a racetrack totally fits. Like, in the original level from Lost World, Sonic is running non-stop toward the end, and you have to keep going. Like, you cannot stop moving. Getting stopped by anything pretty much means instant death, so you have to keep on running. That same philosophy should apply when racing other people. Like, let's have this course get hectic and unpredictable. Like, I kind of want it to have that baby park energy, especially in lap 3 or whatever the final lap number is going to be. Tons of narrow routes, oncoming hazards, and boost rings galore. Like, just have tons of item boxes at every turn. Like, it just needs to be a total bloodbath. Like, we don't have any course like that in the game where you can just sort of throw down mid-race like that. And I think this would be the perfect course to have that sort of, like, feeling of, like, total disaster, traffic pile-up sort of thing. I'd probably include, like, a flight section where you can fly through the honeycombs or around them if you'd like to. You'd have the option to choose the safe but slower path around the honeycomb tunnels, or you'd probably be able to enter, you know, a tunnel via land to dodge tons of traps. You know, and you'd get rewarded for your risky playstyle with more item boxes and dash panels. So, again, high risk, high reward. I'd probably try to go in the tunnel with my friends online, like, every single time. Like, we'd just risk it for the biscuit, you know? Our second Sonic Lost World course is going to be from Tropical Coast, but it's not the traditional beach act with, like, the fruit and the, you know, the blending machine, that stupid thing that you guys probably all remember and hate. Instead, we're going to be looking at Act 3 specifically. So our second one for Sonic Lost World is going to be Sea Bottom Segway. Even though this is technically like an underwater track, I think it would make more sense for it to just be a background element that surrounds the skybox rather than affect the gameplay in any sort of way. A combination of land and flight would be more fitting since the water is just so out of reach. I don't think I'd want this course to be difficult or too crazy like Honeycomb Highway. I just want it to be chill so you can take in the view, you know, competitive, but casual competitive, if that makes sense. You know, think Rainbow Garden. The course is pretty tame compared to some of the other later tracks in the game, and I want Tropical Coast to have that same energy, only with its own unique, stunning view. You know, a view where you can see fish swimming around above you, and the sunlight calmly shining along the waves. That's the type of look this course needs. It just needs to listen. So, those are my picks for Sonic Lost Worlds tracks. I think those would have been way better than Hidden World. Just saying. I think Hidden World is ass. Oh, I hate talking about Sonic Forces. Sonic Forces, like, this game is so lame, dude. I don't want to pick another course for it. I'm honestly pretty happy with Luminous Forest. It's one of the only unique pieces of scenery that's original to Forces. I would have chosen that zone anyway, so because of that, our only feasible choices are between Sunset Heights and Metropolis, and since we got Sunset Heights and Shadow Generations, by process of elimination, we're pretty much stuck with Metropolis, or Capital City, whatever you want to call it. So there we go. Metropolis is our Sonic Forces track, our second to last track. The only other choices we kind of have are like Null Space and the Eggman Empire Fortress, but who cares about those places, man? I certainly don't. Maybe if Sonic Forces actually did something cool and original, I wouldn't have to be such a penis about it, but Metropolis wins because I'd sooner die than pick Green Hill Zone, but with Sam. So for our last official course, the only options we really have are between Sonic Frontiers and Sonic Superstars, and I know this probably isn't what you want to hear, but I don't have anything for Sonic Superstars on the list because, you know, for the same reason as Sonic Generations, there's not really anything you could add. You know, Sonic Superstars track is literally just the hub world, which includes nearly every zone in the game, so we can skip this one and just jump straight ahead to Sonic Frontiers for sure. So, Sonic Frontiers was a really easy choice. You know, obviously we have the Cyberspace City and Kronos Island in the game, which I think represents Sonic Frontiers really well. I'm a huge fan of those tracks, by the way, and I think they're really well done. And in Shadow Generations, we got Chaos Island, which is just a fantastic translation from open zone gameplay to traditional zone gameplay. They totally knocked it out of the park with Shadow Gens. Like, everything about Chaos Island, Act 1 especially, is so fun to play through and explore. I absolutely love that zone. I think it's the best boost gameplay yet, for sure. For the Sonic Frontiers track, it only makes sense to have the second island, Ares Island, added as a racetrack. So let's just go ahead and drop it in there as our last track. I think the first lap should take place at night with the Starfall event going on. The stars could act as dash rings to boost racers forward if they position themselves properly. Stars, rings, item boxes, you know, they should be constantly falling down from the sky just like they do in Frontiers whenever these events happen. You know, it should be a relatively fast lap because of all the items falling out of the sky, you know. I don't think there should be really any hazards or anything, you know, just tons of goodies to snag to prepare you for the rest of the race. The third lap, though, that's where things get crazy. That's where I think things need to be the complete opposite. Now that the Starfall event is over, the sun has come out, and so has the Wyvern, as a remix of Break Through It All starts to play. To honor the helpful Starfall event items, and instead, tons of lasers, missiles, and explosions storm the track. I want this section to be like hard. Like, I want it to be where if you aren't prepared, you're pretty much guaranteed to get hit by something, and you risk your race being ruined if you don't set up your items or plan your route properly. Maybe parts of this track could have you flying near the Wyvern, with other parts kind of driving around on the ground to avoid incoming ammunition. You know, Ares Island would be a scary track for sure. This would like scar people. I think one of the elements that makes Sonic Frontiers good, and I think the high point of that game that make people talk about it so much, are definitely the supersonic boss fights. So I think having that represented throughout an actual racetrack is going to be super important to just harken back to what made the latest Sonic game so amazing. All right, really quick, I just got done recording the video and it hit me. I missed my favorite Sonic game. I don't know how I could have done that, but yes, I missed Sonic Mania, one of my favorite games in the whole series. So our racetracks for those, we're actually going to go ahead and pick two. I think they're probably two of the most beloved zones that we have within Sonic Mania, and that's going to be both Studiopolis Zone and Press Garden Zone. I think for Press Garden Zone especially, you know, I think there's a lot of fun stuff you could do, from going to Act 1 where it's indoors inside the actual, you know, like newspaper printing press, versus going outside with all the snow and the cherry blossoms and the lanterns and all that. And for Studiopolis, you know, it's Studiopolis, it's iconic. I think when people look at a game like Sonic Mania, they're usually thinking of zones like Studiopolis. I mean, the Act 1 music has gone viral time and time again. Like, I see it on TikTok and social media all the time from people who don't even like Sonic. So yeah, I think those are my choices for Sonic Mania. Again, my bad for forgetting, but I think this is what a more complete version of the list looks like. So there you go. For the people who are just about to type an angry comment wondering where the heck Sonic Mania was, now you have your answer. I don't want to end this video on an anticlimactic note, though. So yeah, Sonic Racing Crossworlds, all the reveals have been full of surprises, and I think so am I, because we have an entire second list of tracks that we are going to add to the game. So even more racetracks in Sega fashion. We are surprising people with some crazy decisions. So I just want to rapid fire the next few choices, which I've labeled under the extra category. You know, something really cool that Sega has done is actually include references to other series right under our noses. The Crossworld that I mentioned earlier, Magma Planet, isn't an original course actually. It's actually based on Planet Valtiro from the Sega game Galaxy Force 2. So stuff like that is super awesome to me, and we're going to need to see a lot more of that to just beef up the course selection and keep fans interested for sure. So these are all going to be from either other Sega properties or third parties, because I think there is a conversation to be had about potential future crossover courses, and that conversation is going to get weird. There is nothing off the table here. So starting off strong, we've got Super Monkey Ball. So in terms of like other Sega properties, I feel like II and Sonic are best buddies, you know? Like, they're constantly crossing over with each other. Like, these guys love each other, man. We've gotten some Super Monkey Ball courses in the past, and I feel like a course based off of the latest entry in the Super Monkey Ball series would be a great addition to the game. Some of the locales in Banana Rumble are actually pretty interesting, though in the same fashion as the latest Sonic games, I think it can do without yet another checkerboard floor pattern like we've seen in some of the past Sega All-Stars racing games. So, you know, no more checkerboard stuff. We've had enough with Green Hill Zone. You know, same shit, different series. Next up, we've got Phantasy Star Online. I'm going to be honest, I know nothing about Phantasy Star Online. Like, the only thing I know is you can play the GameCube one and get a Tails Chow for your Chow Garden on the GameCube Adventure games. And that's enough for me. Like, that makes me happy. But I know this franchise as a whole, it means a lot to a lot of people. It's quite popular. Like, it has a really bustling online scene for sure. Yeah, I just think it's been a long time coming for Phantasy Star Online to get something in one of these spin-off titles. I don't think it's something I can really recall seeing in recent memory. So yeah, I think PSO, it should get its chance to shine in one of these. You know, maybe there could be like a cool crossover bundle. We've seen some Sonic content, you know, like I mentioned with the Tails Chow, and they in 2021 had like a 30th anniversary celebration for Sonic where they had a bunch of different cosmetics and they decorated the hub world. So I think there's a lot of potential cross-worlding, crossovering that's possible here for sure. Next up is Virtua Fighter. And Virtua Fighter, I also think it would be a really great series to showcase for sure. Like, it's just a legacy fighting game title. Like, people in the FGC, like they, like people in the FGC, like they cross their arms and they nod their head in respect whenever they see that game for sure. You know, in the past, we've only gotten a character or two in the Sega and All-Stars racing games, but just like with Phantasy Star Online, I think Virtua Fighter deserves some love in the form of a racetrack as well. You know, maybe you could be driving through like a giant stadium with a Jumbotron that showcases the racers, stage lights, and tons of fighters and crowd members in the background duking it out and cheering. You know, maybe you could get kind of crazy with it. Maybe you could like have one of the laps start off with like a low poly segment or something, and then like lap 3 it's like all HD, or like vice versa. Maybe sneak in some Sonic the Fighters references. You know, maybe bring Honey the Cat back, you know, something like that. I think there's a lot of potential to do some really unique things, you know, with Sonic's really strong ties to the Virtua Fighter series back in the 90s. We've got to get Jet Set Radio and Sonic Crossworlds in one way or another, man. Like, even if it's just for the music or to have a playable character, like, there are just so many bangers in Jet Set Radio and just across all the games that would make excellent additions to the OST. I think I'd be okay with having this course be a lot more stylized. You know, maybe it could be really focused on just like actual graffiti and, you know, maybe like some cell shading or different art styles in general. You know, just create something really dynamic, something really kind of like that pops, you know. Like, it just needs to feel like you can play through. You know, you're playing with something that was literally spray painted on a wall. Like, you're just, you know, it's like art in motion basically. I think you could do some really crazy things with that, you know, especially for lap 3. All right, now we've got Streets of Rage. Streets of Rage, yeah. Streets of Rage gets like no attention from Sega in these games. Like, I feel like it only shows up in those Genesis compilations and nothing else, and we've got to change that. Streets of Rage has a lot of potential to show off its action-packed, you know, crime-riddled nightlife and amazing soundtrack. Like, there are some great songs in the Streets of Rage soundtrack. I love it. So, as long as the iconic Pine Pot is in the background somewhere, then we're A-okay. Let's get Streets of Rage in there. And for our last Sega-focused track, I gotta put you guys on some heat, literally, because we got the Burning Rangers, baby. Burning Rangers. Oh, it would be so cool to see it again. I absolutely love how they handled this track for Burning Depths and All-Stars Racing Transformed. You know, going through the race with character dialogue as if you were on an actual mission was so unexpected the first time I played this, but it was such a cool idea. Like, for those of you that don't know, in single player, when you play on this course, you actually have characters talking in your ear, like through a radio, and as you make your way through the lap, they kind of like talk to you as if you're like going on a mission or something. And I love stuff like that. Like, it is such a cool idea and really ties back to what Burning Rangers is all about, you know, saving people, helping people. You know, you're on a mission to help people in need, and like that's kind of what you get in the form of like a racetrack, I guess. You know, and that's another thing too. You know, there's a lot of people at Sega and Sonic Team, you know, like Sega and Sonic Team's best worked on Burning Rangers. Like, the same people that worked on like Knights and like, you know, the Sonic games that we all know and love so much, they also worked on Burning Rangers. And I think it would be so cool to reference this game. You know, it needs some love every once in a while, I think. You know, Knights is always the one that we kind of regard as like, you know, the Sega Saturn poster boy. You know, we all love that character so much. Like, they're so cool. But I think the Burning Rangers are cool too, bro. You know, those guys are heroes. They save people. So yeah, I would love for something Burning Rangers to get in. I don't know how true, I don't know how possible that is, but it would make me so happy. So now we're in the DLC territory, and let me just say right off the bat, like it's weird. Like I promise you, I'm not trolling. Like, I told you it was weird. I told you it was weird. Don't judge me. Don't judge me. I told you it's weird. Okay, but for real though, I think the first choice for DLC, if you had to ask me like what my dream collab would be, I think having something with The Simpsons would be really cool. You know, listen, if we can have SpongeBob and Minecraft Steve, then I really don't think The Simpsons is even that weird of a pick, you know? I don't think this is going to happen at all since Sega has a good relationship with Paramount. You know, in the past, we've had like Wreck-It Ralph and like Transformed, you know, which is owned by Disney. And we also had Sonic and Eggman show up in like both of the Wreck-It Ralph movies. So, I mean, I'm sure they're cool with each other. I'm sure they could make something work out. You know, if Sega really wanted to talk to Disney and get the Simpsons and let us race as like Homer and Bart or something, then I think they'd make it happen. I think Sega can do it. But yeah, realistically though, I think pretty much their heart right now is with Paramount. So we're probably going to see like some Nickelodeon type stuff again further down the line, or who knows what. But yeah, I don't know. A guy can dream, right? Okay, next up we have the Team Fortress 2 Racetrack. There it is, Team Fortress 2. So I really think it would be cool to bring the TF2 characters back and give them a course this time around. You know, there's almost no way that this is going to ever happen. But if it happened once before, it can happen again. We're seeing that now with Mega Man. You know, Sonic and Mega Man crossed over in the Archie comics all those times ago, and seeing how muddy the waters are with just everything surrounding the Archie comics, it's really crazy that we're seeing them come back again, and this time in an actual video game. I know people constantly like to joke that like TF2 is like a dead game and like needs to get better, and like, trust me, I know. I have several TF2 videos on this channel. Like I've heard it all, but I think TF2's status as like a funny cartoon meme game is still pretty fresh in a lot of people's minds, so I'd imagine people would still celebrate their return all the same. I don't even care what map the track is based off of, just as long as it's like a good track that kind of like conveys that Sonic and friends are in TF2. Like, it just needs to feel like TF2, and that would be enough for me. Or we could get, you know, an official Sonic hat in Team Fortress 2 to kind of promote the DLC or something like that. You know, if you own the DLC, you get a Sonic hat or something. Please, I would love that so much. Now we've got DC, baby, Detective Comics. So the Sonic DC collab was a thing, if anyone remembers that. I'm kind of surprised they never really took advantage of that for Crossworld with like skins or car parts or even tracks, you know. I guess it's totally possible that it was just like a comic book only thing, but either way, I think there's some potential for something neat in the DC universe to merge with an actual game, you know. Plus, now that Multiverses is dead, if anyone remembers that too, you know, Warner Brothers has been a lot more inclined to add their lineup of characters into other game franchises. You know, just take a look at something like Fortnite. You know, there's been new Cartoon Network characters literally every week. You know, we've been seeing Ed, Edd n Eddy, we've been seeing Regular Show, and you know who else was on Cartoon Network? That's right, Sonic, baby. Like Sonic Boom. If anyone remembers waking up at 5 a.m. for that show, let me know, because you are my people. But yeah, I mean, I think some DC content would totally fit in. You know, like the character designs are already there. All they have to do is like, you know, take the models and make it exist. And I think it'd be neat to see what like Superman or Batman or, you know, whoever else they want to put in. You know, let's see how they look in a Sonic game. Our final edition is the big one. So this DLC could very well be one for the history books. Like, this could change lives. For our last one, you've got to add Dragon Ball, man. You've just got to add Dragon Ball Z. It's got to get in the game in like some way, shape, or form. Like, the closest thing we have to this right now is there's like a decal that was illustrated by Akira Toriyama. And listen, Dragon Ball literally inspired like so much of what we love about Sonic, you know. So seeing the two of them finally meet, it would be one for the ages. Like, this would break the internet. I genuinely think that like a lot of social media platforms would just go insane. Like, just imagine all the cool fan art and content, and just it would be so fun for, you know, the Sonic fans and the Dragon Ball fans to, you know, finally meet in the middle over this. Like, it would be so cool. But yeah, I mean, driving around as like Goku and Vegeta, I think would blow people's minds, you know. Having like a flying Nimbus Extreme gear is like just too perfect to pass up. Like, come on now. Like, if Sega put that first and foremost onto a DLC pass, like if they were like, hey, this is DLC Pass 2, the first thing in the pass is Dragon Ball, people would go nuts. Like, people would buy that with zero hesitation. Like, I really think, you know, there was a recent sales report where some Sega executives were saying that they hope that, you know, with future DLC, Sonic Racing Crossworlds can sell more copies and sell more DLC and, you know, whatever have you. And I think that is the way you do it. You know, you get Dragon Ball in the game and it is like a done deal. So yeah, I think Sega would actually be printing money if they landed that deal. And us Sonic fans would be better for it, because that means more DLC, more games, and larger budgets for our favorite franchise. Like, it would be life-changing for us. Like, you guys don't understand. Like, it would, like, you know, the reception for Sonic these past couple years, since like 2020 after the first movie came out, has been so good. Like, let's just keep going. Let's just keep going. You know, we need this series to succeed. We all have to work together and keep, you know, the series' best interest in mind. And, you know, this is the type of stuff we should ask for sure. But yeah, I think those are my choices for all of the Sonic Racing Crossworlds tracks that I would want to see in the game. You know, I'm pretty satisfied with all of my decisions, and hopefully you guys are too. You know, do you agree with my choices? You know, if you don't, you know, let me know which zones you would have liked to have seen as racetracks. But yeah, just let me know in the comments. I love going through and seeing what people think for sure, and it's really fun to talk about different Sonic topics with all of you. But yeah, be sure to subscribe. Check out the link in the description for more information on that giveaway. Like I said, a big thank you to GamerLandSam for making this video possible. And yeah, I'll see you guys. Take care.